You are so ready for your
Born
close
ready.
up.
Um, yeah, so something that exists in the world is soil-based probiotics. So one brand of soil-based probiotics is Primal Defense, and I think you can get 60 capsules for around $40 US. This is the last time I checked on Amazon a few years back, so maybe it's more than that now. But soil-based probiotics are basically soil encapsulated, and the sort of probiotics from soil, isolated into a capsule. And this is selling for a lot of money. And this did not exist 30 years ago, but it exists today. And people are paying for it. And actually, based on the Amazon reviews, people are really benefiting from it. And so this begs the question, I feel, of like, why? Like, what happened to bring us to this point where we're buying like the microorganisms in the soil in a capsule, instead of actually being on the land and more holistically, embodiedly, receiving, like connecting with the earth in a way that allows us to connect with bacteria, through sort of like putting our hands in the earth as opposed to taking soil-based probiotics. And I think there are many different answers to that question, but based on who I am and my trajectory in life, I can say that colonialism is a big factor that impacts my connection to the earth, my ancestral lands, and colonialism meant that my family left the Philippines in their 20s and 30s, to do a lot of care work, like for example taking care of children, doing cleaning work here, because they genuinely felt that coming to Turtle Island was better for their economic prospects and the sort of social and economic prospects of their children, of me and my sister. And I feel like that's such a telling thing, because the Philippines is so abundant in natural resources. And natural resources is even, I feel like, this colonial capitalist technical term for like the sacred earth. Like, natural resources are being extracted from the Philippines. There's so many mining corporations, Canadian mining corporations specifically, and other resource extraction corporations that are based in the Philippines and extracting resources from the earth there because of how abundant, in sacred minerals and sacred different things the land in the Philippines holds. And there are multinational companies that are sort of profiting off of the land of the Philippines, while people like my parents are feeling like they need to go to other places in order to connect with wealth, to connect with sustaining themselves. And I feel like that's a very telling reality, given how much the Philippines is wealthy in, on so many levels. And yeah, so one impact of my parents moving here has been that, and specifically in an urban context of here in Jojage or Montreal, is that I don't really connect with land in the ways that my parents did and my grandma did for survival and also for reasons beyond survival. And one impact of that is that I'm not actually connecting to the soil. I'm not actually connecting to, what people call the probiotics, or sort of like bacteria that's inherent to the land, and that's actually very regenerating and life-giving and restoring. And here I am, and I'm somebody who like takes probiotics or has taken probiotics a bunch and like spent a lot of money on probiotics, in the absence of connecting with bacteria in a more holistic, embodied way with the soil, which I don't want to invisibilize that, or like I don't want to erase the possibility of me working with the land here. Like, there are sort of urban agricultural spaces in Jojage. There are farms, within a few hours proximity that I could travel to. And people are connecting with the earth here, and people have connected with the earth here for centuries and centuries, in ways that are really regenerative and life-giving. But the reality that I exist within is like a settler colonial context, where like if it still feels weird for me to connect with land here in a way that feels like in a way that it feels authentic. I feel like when I'm in the Philippines and I'm connecting with land in the Philippines, there's something that feels more appropriate and authentic in my connection there. And not to say that I don't think I can have like a respectful, reciprocal relationship with land here, but I feel like there's a certain importance in me exploring how to do that in my ancestral lands, before I explored doing that in a really committed way on these lands, which are the ancestral lands of, in this context, like the Ganagahaga Haudenosaunee peoples and people who are indigenous to Turtle Island more broadly. And so yeah, I feel like I do want to connect. I do want to connect with bacteria in my life in ways beyond probiotics and in the ways that my ancestors used to connect to bacteria, which was through connecting with the land. And at the same time find myself realizing that even within that, it still makes sense for me to like take probiotics sometimes, and like and I think like my projects of fermentation, like yogurt or making like buckwheat sourdough, like those projects are sort of like middle ways between like me connecting to ancestral lands, and then taking probiotics, which feel like they're more process oriented, because with like taking probiotics you're literally like you're popping a pill and you're like drinking water, and it feels really consumptive, like it feels really linear, like you're just taking something that's encapsulated and isolated. Whereas when I'm actually like fermenting like sourdough, or like when I'm fermenting coconut water kefir, or like making coconut yogurt, there's a process that's very ritualistic and like cyclical, and like that feels like there's like a genuine exchange between me and like the co-creation that makes me feel like I'm actually nurturing something in a way that isn't just consuming but also like co-creating, and that feels and it's very spiritual for me. And so I feel like yeah, fermentation and engaging specifically, I think coconut yogurt is where it's at for me these days. Specifically, like co-creating coconut yogurt feels like a real way to connect with land, to connect with ancestry, to connect with like the spirituality that is inherent in bacteria. Because
do you want to explain a little bit of what you mean by co-creating?
what do I mean by co-creating? Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like I like the word co-creating because co-creating implies collaborativity, and I feel like one myth that I'm in the process of like unlearning is like that we create in an isolated context, and what we create is like sort of like in a vacuum, devoid of like so many histories that precede us, and devoid of like the infinitude of like life forms that are present with us, that are allowing us to co-create in the moment. And like, I don't know, I really, really like the word co-create. I feel like it just acknowledges in a very simple way that everything that we're making is based in relationships, is based on a process that is collective. And at the same time, I feel like I want to acknowledge that, we all create in unique ways, and that people co-create, and that there are individuals who sometimes, maybe take on more energy than others in a project, and that co-creation is like a process where also individuals lead creation in specific ways. And I want to honor like every person who's part of like a process of creating, and at the same time I feel like honor that it's always a collective process. So like in coconut yogurt, for example, like I'm not making the coconut yogurt, like it's the coconuts that are making the coconut yogurt with me. It's the farmers who like farm the coconuts. It's the people who transported from the Philippines or Sri Lanka like the coconuts over here. It's the people who packaged the coconuts in the store. It's the people who sold me the coconuts in the store. It's the bacteria that's in my living room that co-created the coconut yogurt with me. It's not just me, and I think it's actually very it's very grounding for me to like remind myself of that, and it's very humbling for me to remind myself of that, because it just reminds me that I'm not in it alone, that like I'm always, because I live by myself, like I like reminding myself that I'm actually not by myself. It's very like exciting for me to be like, oh no, like these farmers are actually like with me in this kitchen right now, or like these bacteria babies are like with me in the kitchen right now. And yeah, that's sort of why I use the word co-create. But yeah, just to sort of end off, I feel like making fermented projects is very much something that reminds me of like, yeah, my connection to like relate back to your question, my connection to like all life forms, and to like my connection to my ancestors. And as Alex probably can like attest to, like, when we were like maybe we should talk about our sisters in motion preparation. That's a funny thing to talk about. So Alex and I did our first contract for catering at Sisters in Motion, which is like a Black and Indigenous people and racialized people a monthly sort of workshop, spoken word workshop that at the event that we catered for, funds were being raised for so that there could be future programming. And yeah, it was the inaugural sort of like fundraising event, and we catered for it, and we asked our ancestors to be with us in the preparation process. We asked specifically our grandmothers to be in the kitchen with us while we were cooking. And I feel like our grandmothers were there. Like there were just things that happened in the kitchen. Like, yeah, there were things that happened in the kitchen related to fermentation, very much related to fermentation, that I feel like showed that our grandmothers were with us and like helping us out in the boo-boos that we were making in the kitchen. And yeah, I feel like fermentation like is actually like this way that is invisible a lot of times, because bacteria is invisible in a lot of ways. It's like this invisible way for us to connect with maybe the spirit world or spirituality. And I actually very much feel like bacteria are spirits, and this is something that is highlighted, I feel like, or like validated in the ways that a lot of indigenous traditions see like spirits, which could literally be translated into spirits, as an alcohol, that's fermented drinks, as important components to ceremony. So in different indigenous traditions in the Philippines, people will incorporate spirits or alcohol into ceremonies to offer ancestors and to invite ancestors in the spirit world to partake in the ritual that they're part of, or the ritual that they're sort of initiating. And yeah, I feel like bacteria is such a way to connect with the spirit world and spirituality in ways that are really exciting, and ways that can be really delicious and really nutritious. And yeah. Okay, I think I'm done.